So today is the 1st of February 2021, and we have this firm intention, this sincerity, the resolve to train ourselves. And having this resolution in the practice is something that's very important because it's possible to be resolved or have this resolution towards anything, to have this desire. But it also takes faith as well. So we can have these qualities in worldly things or in terms of Dhamma. And whenever we have this effort, resolution, and faith, then we will meet with success. And so we try to bring up these qualities, we try to bring up this sincerity, this resolution to train ourselves with effort, and we will be able to reach the goal that we have set our hearts on. So just like some children, they are really resolved in their studies, and even though they meet with obstacles which bar the way, they don't retreat, they don't give up. And they'll be able to meet with success in their studies. And so for these children, you don't need to control them, you don't need to force them in any way. But for some children, they just like amusement, they just like entertainment. And it becomes even more of a problem when they turn into adults and they start being able to gain their own money. And so they think that since I earned this money, then I can use it in any way that I want. But this is a thought which lacks intelligence. And people who believe this, they'll often go down the paths of deprivation. They'll go out at night, go and drink alcohol, get involved in gambling. And these are the things which just leads us towards wasting our lives, wasting our money. And people who do this, they don't have wisdom in terms of using their wealth in a wise way. Sometimes children are born into very wealthy families, and ever since a young age, they don't have any interest in putting in any effort and doing any work. And then when they become a young adult, they don't do any work. And when they're an adult, they don't do any work. They just have this amusement in worldly things. And in the end, the money that they got from their parents all gets wasted, and they turn from a rich person into a poor person. And so the Buddha taught that all of us, we can develop, we can all practice. And if we practice from a child, and we can reach the stage of anagami, for it's a bit older than sakadagami. And when we're old, nearly the end of our life, and we can still all able to reach the stage of sotapanna. And so some people, they don't have this effort in any work in terms of Dhamma, work in terms of the world, because they're just lost in all of the things, all the sensations that they experience. So we see that we do need to try to build up these qualities of generosity, of sacrifice. And for those people who are able to do this, it shows that they have faith in the Buddha. And when we have this faith, then we're able to do these things. But some people steal money and then go and offer that. And even though they are generous, they don't have sila, they don't have virtue. But for those people who are intelligent, they'll have both of these qualities of virtue and generosity, and this is a higher form of merit. And for those who are even more firmly intent, they'll want to build up their goodness even further. So they'll try to make their hearts very well established, to collect them together. And this is more difficult to do, but it's something that we are able to do. And if we carry on putting in our efforts without stop, then one day we'll have to succeed in this, in samadhi for sure. So if we are quite old already. If we're already over the age of 50, then we really do need to put in a lot of effort, because the house that we're living in is starting to fall apart. And probably in the last 50 years, you spent your time studying and working in order to be able to live. But the more we study, the more we work, then the less and less our lives have remaining. And what we're working to support is basically this body. But this body is just a place for illnesses to arise. When we have a heart, then there'll be illnesses of the heart. When there are kidneys, liver, then there'll be sicknesses of these things. So what should we do then? And there's always the sense of me and mine. There's always an I there. I am born. I get old. I am sick. It's me that dies. There's always this presence of me. And when there's this me, then there'll also be attachment that arises, or this arises due to this attachment. And it's avijja that gives rise to the sense of self. And the mind simply doesn't understand. But if we have wisdom training our minds, teaching our minds, then it'll tell us that there isn't any true self there. These things aren't me, they're not mine, they're just nature. And if the mind is pure, if there's no proliferation going on, then it'll be able to reach the end of suffering. But when there's this presence of tanha and upadana, of craving and clinging, then there'll be proliferation. And due to that, we'll need to die and get born and spin around in the cycle of samsara. And it's not that this life is the first life that we've had. And it's not that when we die, we're not going to get born again. Because if there is this attachment in our heart, then that will lead us on to a new birth. So we do need to try to put in our efforts for the sake of firmly establishing our heart so that wisdom can arise. And so the wisdom that we talk about in terms of Buddhism is that which comes from listening, that which comes from thinking. Now, both of these can give rise to wisdom. And then there's also the wisdom that comes from contemplating with a peaceful mind, a mind that's still. And this gradually, steadily, will give us knowledge. So for us practitioners, even though we meet with difficulties, we need to keep our resolve, carry on without stopping. And the great teachers said that if we can do this, then we'll all be able to get there. Even though our barami, our spiritual maturity, may not be very much, if we stay close to a great teacher, we'll be able to get there all the same. We'll be able to see the danger in old age and sickness and death. And even though we may have many duties, a lot of work, we may have a family, we shouldn't be heedless. We should practice, we should chant. Go through this chant of Itipiso 108 times, or chant Bahum. And this is for the purpose of bringing about inner peace. These are the objects of the recollection of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So really have this resolve to practice in this way. When we have effort and mindfulness and wisdom, we'll be able to get there. That the mind is sided with this practice. It's supporting this practice. And then we can look and seek out within ourselves knowledge, trying to understand into causes and results. And just like the names that we call things, sometimes there's someone that we're very close to, and we go to call out their name, but we forget their name. We ask ourselves, well, what are they called again? So sometimes this memory just doesn't come up. And other times the memory does come up, but it's just convention. And the truth is, there's no name, there's no male, there's no female. These things don't actually, or they're not actually real. But these conventions of names, that this is called this and that's called that, this comes up, this arises. But we also need to have an understanding into this. because it's delusion which attaches and thinks that this me is real and I am called this. This is just the getting deluded about conventions, and it happens with great speed. But in reality, these things aren't there. These are just conventions. So therefore, when we use our wisdom, we'll be able to see into the nature of these conventions. See, these bodies are just a collection of elements. And this collection of elements, another person's collection of elements, there's no difference between them. And so if I call this thing me, then everyone, all beings have to be me as well. So we contemplate in this way, and steadily knowledge will arise. And one day our minds will collect together into samadhi and will gain a clear understanding. This vimutti, freedom, liberation will arise. This comes from understanding the nature of conventions. When this happens, then we see into the Dhamma. When we see or understand anicca, dukkha, anatta, this inconstancy, stress, and not self, then we've seen into the Dhamma. So may all of you really practice. And think to yourselves, if you're over the age of 50, then you're really close to decay, really close to degeneration. If you're 55 or 60, then you're in old age already. These things really aren't sure. It's just like a fruit tree. And if a strong wind blows, then that fruit may fall off. But if there's no strong wind, then it'll probably stay for a bit longer. And so these bodies may stay in this world for a while, but they can't stay here forever. And sometimes there are monks who are 25 years old, 30 years old, but they shouldn't get heedless in that youth either, because all beings need to die. We can't stay here, because these bodies are just sankharas, they're conditioned phenomena. And the Buddha taught us already that all sankharas are of the nature to degenerate. These things are not sure. You contemplate that the Buddha reached 80 years old, and he was able to give great benefit to this world that no other being could compare to him, and his compassion was limitless. But even so, his body needed to fall apart. And that's just the way of this world. So we can ask ourselves, well, who in this world is able to take their bodies with them when they die? So we contemplate seeing all things as anatta, as not self. And we just carry on doing things like this. We carry on practicing in this way, putting in our efforts. We don't retreat. So having this firm resolution is very important. And at the times when there's no effort, what that's due to is getting distracted, is getting amused and drunk on the various sensations we experience. And do we see that? For those people who are really lost in these things, they don't have any effort. And if they do gain effort, then getting amused, getting lost in these things reduces. So sometimes our children, they just don't have any effort. They don't try to study. They don't try to find any money. And maybe they're able to get some wealth, but it's in a manner that's not correct. In a way, it's too easy. And when they gain it easily, then they lose it very easily as well. And so we should try to see the danger in these things and really give rise to our efforts, see the benefit of having effort, and really firmly establish our hearts, set our hearts on this. And then wisdom, knowledge can arise. This knowledge that will allow us to be freed from suffering, and our minds turn bright as a result. So we need to set our resolve to be focused, to be sincere. Everyone, both the monks and the lay people.